If the ancient Egyptian language was a lost language, how was it solved? How did it go from absolutely no information to deciphering most of it to the point where they can tell entire stories? The stuff we hear today is that the Rosetta Stone was what decided that we are going to finally crack the code of the ancient Egyptians. But it turns out that this is not the case. In fact, this was never the case. Ancient Egyptian had been deciphered, or at least partially deciphered, in 900 AD by the Arabs, especially by a man named Ibn Washia, who spent his whole life trying to decipher the words. And when he realized that Coptic was just another version of ancient Egyptian,
Did you know that in modern Egypt there are still distant descendants of ancient Egyptians? Moreover, they conduct worships in their churches in a language that emerged from ancient Egyptian. Those people are called Copts, and their language is Coptic. But their alphabet no longer looks like Egyptian hieroglyphs. It looks like this. The modern Coptic alphabet was formed during the time when the Greeks ruled Egypt, from the 4th BC to the 7th century AD. Therefore, if you can read Greek or Cyrillic, you could try to read something in Coptic. However, you will not understand anything because it is a language from a completely different language family.
as you notice, he then realized that Coptic had some similarities with Arabic, and so he realized that the Arabic letters came from ancient Egyptian. This is a profound thought to have back in the day, but it tells you how deep the scholars were back then in the Islamic Golden Age. This is not war. This is not for expanding medicine. This is not for expanding. This is pure intellectualism at its best. So, how did Ibn Washir do this? Well, in his book, he systematically starts to break it down. It's written, one of the works attributed to Ibn Washir is the Kitab Shak al Mustaham fi Marifat, or the Book of the Desire of the Maddened Lover for the Knowledge of Scripts, Secret Scripts, a work dealing amongst other things with Egyptian hieroglyphs. Its author refers to his extensive travels in Egypt, but Ibn Washir himself seems never to have visited Egypt, a country which he barely even mentions in his authentic works. For this and other reasons, scholars believe that the work to be spurious. According to Jaco Hamin Antila, it may have been authored by Hassan ibn Faraj, an obscure descendant of the Harashian scholar Sanin ibn Thabit ibn Qura in 880 to 943, who claimed to have merely copied the work in the year 413 AH, corresponding to 1022 to 3 CE. Now, whether or not you believe that he wrote it down, by the era of the Golden Age, it was already solved. Not the whole thing, but a lot of it. This changes completely the. By the way, saying that the he did not visit Egypt, therefore he couldn't have understood this, is silly. This was the translation movement. This was the era of deep understanding, and so thousands of books would have been on his lap. But then, secondly, he and other scholars, they were at this time deeply involved in something called alchemy. And of course, because they thought that it was the secret to turning base metals into gold, there would have been a deep dive, a deep need to see these translated. And so I can understand why even people who didn't go to Egypt would have given it a go. Whether or not the book was written by Ibn Washir, which we do know it happened back in the Golden Age, where they would pick a name and then they would attribute almost every discovery to one person. This has been true to some mathematicians and all of that, where they'd pick a name and then they'd keep throwing ideas like, okay, I invented this cure, and then they'd throw it to one person. So it's possible that Ibn Washir did some advances and then they were thrown at him. But we didn't know that the people at this time discovered this and realized it. Now, if you look at this, you can see that there's some translations, and most of them are actually correct, surprisingly. He realized that Arabic is similar to Egyptian. Now, to our eye, there is no reason why we should think that the Arabic language should be connected to Egyptian at all. But if we look at the house hieroglyph and we look at the hieroglyph right below it, you can see that there's this thing where it's like a horn or something. Now, I don't know how they came to this conclusion, but again, these guys were good. Why was Egypt considered such a sacred land, both by Europeans and by Middle Easterners? I mean, Middle Easterners had civilizations that dated as far back as the ancient Egyptian ones. So, why did they consider the Egyptian ones to be so sacred? Well, it's mainly because of their inventions, because Egyptians had glass thousands of years before people thought it was invented. And so they thought if they could take stuff like sand and turn it into glass, then what else could they do? And of course, mysticism got thrown in there. I mean, the way that everything looks, and there was a lot of people who were deep diving. I mean, alchemy became a big thing. And when scholars in the Islamic world inspired European scholars, you started to get people like Abramelin the Mage. You started to get mages all over Europe who wanted to contribute in alchemy until obviously it got banned. But there was one person who continued it far into the future, and that was Isaac Newton. Like most other alchemists, the secrets of the universe lay somewhere in Egypt. And so Isaac Newton made it his job to try and discover this. As you can see in this article about Isaac Newton, it says, revealed, Isaac Newton attempts to unlock the secret code of the pyramids. And so Isaac Newton has a handwritten notes by Isaac Newton that show his investigations into the Egyptian pyramids, which he thought using the pyramids you could discover or identify how big the world was, the circumference of the earth, which, you know, with some fudging, some people know how to do it today. Maybe it was true, maybe it was not true. All I gotta say is Isaac Newton believed this, and because he did, he proves deeply that the alchemists, just like himself, the final alchemist, the final true smart alchemist, was into Egypt in a deep way. Now, here's the second thing about Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton's brand of Christianity lined up closer with the with Islam. He did not want to believe in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit because he thought it broke a certain code, which is in monotheistic religions, you're only supposed to have one God. But Father, Son, and Holy Spirit means three gods. Whether or not you claim it's the same person, that's three separate entities, and he wanted to believe in one. I don't want to go on a tangent. I just wanted to say that because I wanted to say Isaac Newton was not the first real scientist of the West. He was the last real Islamic scientist of the Golden Age.